Before we get started, let's do some intros. And let's start with Raphael. Maybe if you want to say who you are, what you do, where you work, and then we can get started.
Hey everyone, yes, thanks for having me today. So I led the app ecosystem at Aircall. I joined back in 2018. We were around 70 back then. Now the company is 600 plus employees. Revenue has grown a lot, and tech partnerships too. We have two very large partnership organizations in North America, Europe, and now APAC as well. And the ecosystem grew from a few integrations to a thriving marketplace with hundreds of technology partners. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining. Sunir.
Hi, I'm the president of the Cloud Software Association. We're going to have our SaaS Connect conference, the SaaS Partnership Conference, again in April 27, 28. So please stop listening to this panel right away and go buy a whole bunch of tickets for you, your friends, everyone. That's what you should be doing right now, because we haven't seen you in so long, and I miss buying drinks for you guys with your own money. So please do that. I'm also the CEO of AppBind. We solve all the partner billing problems when you're actually trying to sell subscriptions through partners. Which is very difficult because software is no longer in boxes. And so I'm kind of more in the channel these days, but in my past lives, I also ran the partnership ecosystems at FreshBooks as a CMO at Olark Live Chat, and I'm a really weirdly computer sciencey nerd as well. So I built the data warehouses at both of those companies. So, and I have a master's degree in research and methods. So I also did all the triangulation around attribution in the partner channel. So I can go super nerds on this, but please buy tickets so I can buy you drinks because I'm actually cool. So do that right now. SaaSconnect.org. Buy ticket.
Wow. Thank you, Sunir. Don, how about you?
Hi, everyone. That's a tough act to follow. My name is Don Barron. I lead enterprise partnerships at Slack, now part of Salesforce. And we've had quite a journey in terms of building an ecosystem, recruiting big partners, recruiting many different kinds of partners. And I really focused quite a bit on measuring success over the last 3 years. I've been there for over 3 years. So this is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart and that I have a few strong opinions on. So I'm looking forward to sharing those. I'm also hiring. So if we're doing shameless plugs, I'd like to put one in for myself and my team. Slack is an exciting place right now with all the stuff happening. So if you're interested in learning more, check out my LinkedIn, and looking forward to connecting with y'all.
I'm loving all the self-promotion.
Got to do it. Got to get it in.
You got to do it. Sunir really set the tone. Billy, how about you?
Hey, Christina. Billy Robbins from Productboard. Thanks for not having me follow Sunir and his intro. No disrespect, Tom. So I head up partnerships at Productboard and based in San Francisco, and previously built out the tech partner ecosystem at Zendesk. So excited to be here today.
Awesome. Thank you for joining. And Shailesh.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Shailesh Podwal. I work at Salesforce for business development. So Don, we have to come a long way to meet here each other on this, but thank you for that, Christina. Just came out of the wonderful company kickoff. We're still in that, but all good. I'm running some of the tech partnerships here, leading one of the product partnerships from the tech partnership perspective. In the previous career, I used to run the North America's partnerships for a company called Conga for all SIs and ISVs and resellers, all that stuff. So happy to be here. I can understand both tech partnerships and an SI partnership world and the challenges and how they can work together and how they cannot work together. So happy to share my thoughts. Happy to be here. Happy to be with all of you here.
Awesome. Well, thanks, everybody. And as I mentioned, for the folks that have just joined, we have some questions queued up, but we'll also save time at the end. So if you have thoughts, please feel free to drop them into the Q&A, and we'll grab those towards the end here. So let's get started. Oh, and the way I typically call on folks is if you unmute, I assume you have something to say. So if you don't have something to say, stay muted. Sunir might just be unmuted the entire time, but that's fine. We'll give other people a chance to.
Maybe Simon Cowell. That's my goal.
You're gonna heckle. Okay, here we go. Right at the top, what are the best processes for tracking partner influence and assigning it a business value?
I wrote a very long Slack comment about this, so I will take up the entire 40 minutes if I answer this question. So I will leave other people to answer first.
I'm happy to, yeah, I'm happy to jump in just in terms of business value. So this question and the question around value, I think is there's no one answer for this, and you're going to hear a lot of different things, I think, across all these different panelists. I think like the most important lesson to take is to sort of like ladder down from whatever core business metrics your company is setting and making sure that whatever you're measuring is sort of very relevant and aligned closely with your core company metrics. So I think like before we talk, or there's many different ways to measure, and we're going to get into those, but like as a first order priority, I'd say I would definitely make sure that you're aligned. Otherwise, you're going to be measuring things that nobody cares about. And you're going to think that you're doing a good job, and you may be doing a good job, but unless you're getting like that visibility to the highest levels of your company that, this is actually meaningful and this is actually aligned with what they're trying to do, you can spend a lot of cycles without really tracking the right things. So that's sort of a good baseline as far as I'm concerned, just to make sure that you're on the right track for measurement.
Yeah. So I kind of agree with you, Dan, but the one of the things from the technology partners, which I feel is, right now, everybody's talking about this freaking transformation and digitization, and everybody has a different meaning of that, right? So if you want to do that really transformative journey, you can't go from path A to B, the days are gone. You don't build the point-to-point connection. You have so many white spaces. Nobody builds the end-to-end solution, right? And that's where this technology partnerships really comes in. The challenges of the value, actually, I personally like to go back to the basics, right? Because if you're, and that's what Don, I think, was referring to, if your KPIs are not aligned, the challenges that we run into is how to show that value, because the sales shows the value because they are selling, they are creating their pipe. The BDRs or SDRs, they go and create the leads and they get measured on that. How does a partnership person show the value, right? What you're influencing. And that's where you need to get aligned. Second thing is, I often run into the sales team and they ask me a question that, technology partnership influencing the revenue. How does it really happen? I understand that when I work with Deloitte and Accenture, but how does really technology partnership works? And that's the inward enablement and education. That's the key thing that needs to happen. And then the third thing, the last thing is single source of truth. And because the partnership world, everybody simply forget to update the data in CRMs, and that's where the real issue starts. Because if you are not able to show that value and bubble that up to the leadership, you're always going to get the question, why should I give you the money to hire more, invest more, because show me the results, right? And that's where my head is, because I generally try to go back to the basics when this worlds of transformation and digitization comes in, because unless everybody understands the world in the same way, there's no single path to get to the same value, because ultimately value has to be realized at the organization level and then not only at the personal level. That's kind of my 2 cents.
Yeah, to jump on Don's point on, before you measure the impact of tech partnerships, just take a step back, understand what are your KPIs. And as an earlier stage startup, we also noticed that you have to understand your product and the value integrations deliver. You have a place in the software stack of your buyers, and some integrations will definitely be required to close a deal, and some will come and influence the customer much later in the journey. And so don't try to fit a square in a peg hole. If most of your integration, like if you're actually the platform and most of your integration are just bringing like additional value, you'll get referrals from partners, but it's unlikely that it will massively drive revenue. At Aircall, we had some categories of integration that were directly impacting revenue. We don't close a deal if there's no like CRM or help desk involved for like 80% of the deals we close. And so that's clearly like where partnership can measure impact on revenue, but that's isolated in a specific category, and then you can expand to other categories of integration. So there are many ways to track the influence on revenue, but before you do that, really understand what you're trying to achieve. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a great color, Raphael. I think it's one thing, Shailesh, kind of running at the scale that you guys are running at with the Empire and the Death Star and everything. But for folks that are just starting out, I think being able to identify patterns and see, what other software your customers are using or prospects are coming up in sales conversations. And then understanding, and I think Raphael raised some great points there in terms of the sequencing. At Zendesk, it was very clear that e-commerce platforms were chosen before customer service. And so we were downstream from Shopify or Magento or BigCommerce or what have you. Whereas voice providers were frequently downstream from Zendesk. And so it creates different dynamics in how you're doing the education and enablement. And it creates different value propositions in the sales cycle and different points of the funnel. So I think getting clarity around that and building out a mental model of 4 or 5 kind of assumptions of how you're approaching it, because not all integrations are going to deliver the same value, and therefore as a high growth startup or an early stage startup, you can't measure them all the same.
I would like to tie all these ideas together and give maybe a more specific framework of action that you could take to wherever you are. So it does depend on your company, because you have to, as Don mentioned, you have to align to what other people are doing. But let's think about how you're going to take this talk and apply it. So one thing you should understand, I think a lot of people in partnerships also get lost with this. Partnerships is only an additive function to the core lifecycle of a customer. So as a SaaS company, the customer already has a journey, demand, they come in from marketing to sales, and then they convert, and then success and fulfillment and retention and referrals, the pirate metrics, if you want to use that, or the typical butterfly funnel. Your customer is going through the journey. Partners come in when the customer needs another company for some reason in order to migrate through that funnel, right? And if you understand where your company is currently focused, whether it's demand generation or net revenue growth because on retention or adoption, or the sales message because the product is not complete, that's where the company is going to want you to focus. And you as a partnership function team should be finding partners that are aligned to that part of the customer journey. So that's one level of framework that your CFO or CEO would understand, because they're already looking at the customer funnel, presumably end to end. And that's where you can figure out where they're focused on and where to focus yourself aligned to their objectives. I put a link in the chat as well to think about, therefore, the metrics that you might evaluate any given partnership with. This is a talk from the 2018 SaaS Connect that I did, but it was we had a similar conversation. Conversation never goes away in partnerships. So I kind of summarize our thinking at the time. And there's really 3 major pirate metrics. So demand, the pirate metrics are a Dave McClure thing, although Dave McClure is persona non grata, but the pirate metrics are good. But the first one is demand. So a lot of people just want more more signups, more logos. That's the number one thing partnerships are going to be evaluated on. The second one is adoption and retention. So that is actually making the product a more interesting product. And as Raphael points out, those are different, right? So you can have upstream partners who are sending you customers, and you can have downstream partners in integration that are building a product that's more robust, that makes the customers actually convert and stick around. Those are different kinds of tech partnerships. And the final one is revenue, because a particular partner could help do upsells, cross-sells. They could even give you a rev share. That could also be interesting to you as you're more mature, although that's usually a more mature thing. But that link can give you a framework to analyze this. But as Don said, you want to align it. The best thing to do is ask your higher ups, what is the customer life cycle that they are most focused on right now, and find partners who can help you with the customer at that part of the journey. As a really, really good way to simplify the analysis and approach.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times people see partnerships as a Hail Mary to find the gaps, to fill in the gaps where you're not successful as a company. My experience has been actually that if you could find areas where you are successful and continue to add value to where people are focused, it's actually a better strategy rather than saying oh, we're not doing this, partners go figure it out. That's typically starting on the wrong foot and in a marginalized sort of position. But if you can align yourself with core values and core goals, I think you're going to be more successful.
Yeah, don't be the backup team for the main band. That's not a good place to be as a partnership.
Yeah,
team.
and don't pick up things that haven't worked for the company historically. Yeah, sometimes partners can help with that, but more often than not, if you're adding fuel to the fire rather than igniting a different fire. I don't know. Sunir is the metaphor guy, but that's my best.
It's
shot.
Actually the skunk works thing, where the CEO has an idea, but they couldn't get the rest of the company to align, so they come to partnership. You're the business person, you figure out
Right.
something new, and please don't take that position, because you're just going to eat the CEO.
Yes, it's a long shot.
Yeah, don't be that.
Yeah.
All right, kicking it off to a strong start. And this kind of dovetails into this next question here. So how should organizations be tracking integrations impact on retention and ACV?
That is a really complicated question. There's like the standard answer, but it is incomplete. The problem is that there is, as anyone knows, causation versus correlation continues to haunt partnerships because there's an indirect impact on customers. So as I've had this conversation endlessly with Mike, who's a CEO at FreshBooks and a friend of mine, but we debated quite a bit. How do you know that they weren't just the most enthusiastic customers who therefore added a whole bunch of other integrations because they're like really excited to get on board because they're just going to use every feature, and the integrations are part of the feature program. So I did put in the SCA Slack link to actually I answered someone else in the Cloud Software Association Slack, and a very long list of what you're supposed to do, but you must, and this is a research person in me because I have a master's in research, triangulate. You cannot just use direct measures of a customer signed up and then within 7 days or 30 days, you have to measure that. Use these integrations and their LTV for that customer segment. If you facet them in your data warehouse, people who are like HubSpot integrated are like the highest value customers, and those were Salesforce customers, for whatever reason, they're having a problem with the integration and therefore they're turning more. You should absolutely analyze that stuff because you got to fix your Salesforce integrations. Yes, because they're probably going to be higher LTV, but what you don't know is whether they would have bought that anyway. So the other thing you have to do is survey your customers. Why did you buy this software? What were you looking for? Right. And maybe they're like, well, we were hoping, and just because Salesforce is here, they were hoping for the Salesforce integration because we saw you do CRMs, but it was not working very well. And we have all this other stuff we need to go with, like Pardot or whatever, Salesforce Marketing Cloud, we needed to work with the system, but it wasn't. And then, there's a lot of value on the table. You must interview customers. That's the only way to understand what's going on in their mind, right?
Yeah, and Raphael, I'm actually curious for you guys, because you, as a company really early on in Aircall, made like a strong bet on ecosystem and integration. So I'm curious, especially I know some of the folks in the audience here are at companies that are, sub 1,000 people, maybe sub 500 people. And it's hard when you don't have a really large cohort to draw like insights. So I'm wondering early on how you guys handled that. Yeah,
and I'm also curious to get the panel's input there because they might have more experience on that. We just started measuring it after our ecosystem had grown quite a bit. So of course you can look at the impact of a specific integration on the customer lifecycle, and that's more of a product thing. Although when the integrations start to get built by partners, then nobody looks at that, and so you miss some data points. But as a whole, what we were looking at is our assumption was the more integrated a customer is, so that means the more different kinds of integration they use, the stickier it is. I mean, in Aircall, you're using a phone system, you have a sales team, you have a support team. If both teams start using the phone system in the company, then they have 2 integrations and it's more sticky. So just as a first principle, it made sense. And we could verify that with some cohorts of customers that were there for a long time and had like 5, 6+ integration, which was quite a bit for Aircall, considering there's only like 100 integration on the marketplace and like 5, 6 categories. So it's not like you can integrate like 20 apps and like Jiffy and whatnot. But basically we verified it on small cohorts. But I think we need an even bigger scale in terms of breadth of ecosystem, and so that's why I'm curious. Slack, Salesforce, Zendesk, like what was measured there actually.
And you got the right folks on the call. I don't know, Don or Billy, if you guys have any thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different things here. Again, I think when it comes to source revenue, in my experience, it's been mostly on the marketing side. So, joint marketing campaigns, and again, just align really closely with the marketing teams and making sure you're in process and everything is working so that, there's a known motion on the marketing side to whether it's events or webinars to sort of drive revenue. On influence, it's really tricky. I mean, again, it's sort of like coming up with a number that everyone can at least agree that has some sort of directional influence. One thing that I think is important when it comes to influence is to make sure you're not just the one going in and tagging deals in Salesforce. What we did at Slack is create a system where our reps can go reach out to partners in shared channels. And then as soon as that request happens, we create through workflows and automation, we create an object in Salesforce that hangs off of that opportunity that they're asking about. And then in a couple of weeks later, we actually go back and ask the rep and we say, hey, rep, like, how was that conversation? Did it influence the deal? Did it help you move the deal forward? And they say, yes, it did. And so then you have like this attestation from the Salesforce reps themselves, or excuse me, from your sellers, that the actual conversation or the collaboration you've had with a partner was meaningful. So if you're doing field collaboration, I feel like that's an important step. But yeah, so anything that you can do to sort of get into process and sort of like keep salespeople on the ACV, sort of on the selling side in the loop and attesting to the value is helpful.
Yeah, and Don, that's a good point. But some of the smaller organizations, they don't have a liberty to have the partner sales, partner account manager, partner success manager, all those different roles, right? So to your point that you should be in touch with the field, and I think that's very important, because partner person, sometimes I've seen, they just make an introduction and then just disappear. They think that deal is going to go through on its own. That validation at every stage of the sales cycle, that's where you really start to see that deal happening and partner providing the value, because otherwise you run into the challenges of, hey, was it really influenced by partner or sourced by partner? Because someone from the marketing is going to have the claim, whether it's a marketing lead or it's a partner marketing lead, or where the lead came from. So that becomes very important. And then you have to Sunir's point, you need to keep on checking that with customer that, hey, who's working with you? Why are you buying the software? Because in today's world, your solution may have 3 or 4 partners working on the whole customer journey, and you need to bring in all those partners. So the real question is really, how do you bifurcate that revenue split between those partners? And that's kind of, I mean, it's still a work in progress for me, but probably if anyone has any view on that, that would be an interesting way to look at the overall deal, because there is gone are the days when there is 2 partners, you work with the multiple partners, and how to attach the relevant revenue share to that partner to give them a credit, because it's always a give and get. You want them to bring in your deal, into their deal, you have to bring them into your deal too, right? Because you always have an option, but who's really playing with you that game for that customer to make it big?
Awesome. Billy, excuse me, I'm not sure if you have any additional thoughts there.
I think we've got other topics. I think people gave great input there. Yeah.
Well, so if we move on to an additional question here, how do you guys think integration marketplaces are going to become transactional? And do you measure the business value of both being in and having your own kind of non-transactional marketplace?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a tie to the prior question, at least from a retention standpoint. I think if you think about SaaS companies and marketplaces, there's on this continuum from value creation for customers, which is where they all start out, and then they evolve to value extraction. And when you're the center of the universe, you can take a value extraction method and you're less interested and less focused, and the incentives that the team has are not around customer value or even partner value, but they're really around extraction. And I think when you get to that place, then you really lean into the transaction piece and you start talking about how much revenue you're generating. You say partners are generating this amount, but I think the reality is, I think Microsoft's the only one who does a great job of really creating a robust set of partner value in as a percentage of what they gather. So I think for most of the companies who are earlier stage on this call, it's you don't worry about transaction, you worry about optimizing for customer value.
I think this is a very complicated topic, only because SaaS has really screwed up the tech industry. Like it's just, I mean, By the way, I run this conference I run every year. I just basically talk at every other keynote. So people are just like bored of it. They start booing me when I start talking about this. But the fact of the matter is, everything technology is sold through a value chain, except for subscription software, right? Because you cannot sell subscriptions through partners. And this is why all of us are banging our heads against attribution. There's no attribution problems. Back in the old days, when I was, 18, 19, 20, people would call us up. We would ship them a box of, like a pallet of boxes. Attribution was simple. We'd charge them 40% list price. They'd sell it on to their clients. We'd salute them and call it a day, and book the revenue. It was very simple. Right? You cannot do that with subscriptions because the customers have to buy direct, and you cannot phone everyone from Mountain View around the world. People in Indonesia and Brazil, are not going to pick up the phone with you and respond to you, and you need to build a value chain. And this is why I ended up building AppBind to support the partner resale motion. But the same thing goes with app stores, right? There really are no retailers of SaaS. There are a few. I mean, Shopify App Store is one. Apple's to some degree, Apple iTunes is example. Steam, like their Valve stores example. Salesforce is working on it to some degree. Microsoft Azure is another example. All fits and starts, but this will have to happen. Even the AWS Marketplace, as much as they are reselling from their quota, are mostly doing it using the 19th century technology of a bunch of people with green rimmed hats and paper shuffling around in coal light. It's just paper order desk management for enterprise level sales. And so what's the future of this? Well, it makes a lot of sense to sell a peripheral, because a lot of our products are peripherals, with an anchor app, a platform app. Lotus 123 sold $100 million in its first year because it was tied to IBM PC. This is in today's dollars. Jason Lemkin's always talking to raise to 100 million ARR. Well, they did in 1 year because they're tied to the shopping malls where IBM was. That will be the future again. And it's actually currently, Microsoft is, Shopify, they're building it. It's going to happen. The billing integrations are what kills everybody, of course. And, hopefully solutions like ours. There's also Tackle.io, AppBind, Tackle.io. There's a bunch of players who are working on this. Will make it easier for people to publish, but it's not working right now, I would say.
Strong statements. I was wondering if you were gonna include like GCP, Azure, and kind of those marketplaces, because those do obviously have like a transactional element. I think when you start looking at like the smaller SaaS companies and point solutions, it's really a lot more challenging. And also the nerd in me wants to highlight like the technical kind of lift with that. Being able to like resell licenses requires that you as a company are able to support kind of that exercise in an
Just
API.
look at Ingram, they spent $1 billion roughly, I think, on their Cloud Blue micro, and then they have to go back to the markets to raise money, right? And so they ended up changing ownership. That's a big risk and gamble. That's what scares a lot of people with this. It's really difficult. The cloud, Microsoft, I think, spent $1 billion on their billing engine or more. It's I don't know that exactly, but I believe that is roughly what they published. It's kind of like, it's kind of mind-boggling how expensive it is, because consider how much easier it was. We just used FedEx, back in the day.
We're not going back, Sunir. It's not.
Yes.
Billy, go ahead. Sorry.
You talk about GCP and Azure and AWS. That's great if you're selling to an IT team. If you have a line of business buyer, that really is not going to work. Even Zendesk, when I left, it was $850 million, and AWS was talking like, oh, we can help you, but connect me with an IT buyer when I'm trying to sell to the VP of customer success or VP of customer support or customer experience just doesn't work, doesn't compute.
Yeah, I personally agree with that. I think like there's like a target buyer in sort of like the infra space, but then if you're trying to appeal to anyone that is not hanging out in your cloud hosting provider, it's a little bit of a harder sell. And also like, yeah, we can get into the nuance. It's about being like where your potential buyers are present and where they're spending their time. Not sure if anyone else has thoughts. This is the thing that I spend a lot of time.
Wix has an app store too. Like Wix has an app store. It's doing okay. Yeah. You got to think about from the customer's point of view. Right. So in a customer's actual life, this is how we used to analyze things at FreshBooks anyway. Like there are different anchors. So each team will have an anchor inside. So Zendesk is an anchor for the customer support teams, right? Salesforce is the anchor for sales teams, right? FreshBooks or QuickBooks would be the accounting team. et cetera. So these different anchor apps, and everything else is basically a peripheral to the core anchor app, that the team has. And it makes sense that the anchor apps will build app stores because the customers want to buy whole product solutions for crossing the chasm. And of course, that's, you can call that, value extraction or rent seeking if you want, or whatever you want to call it, but actually it's great because the customer gets a bundle sale and they can just go to one place and get a solution, which is all they want. So, and it could be a great benefit to everyone else. I mean, it's not like you go to the Apple store, it's filled with like non-Apple products because they just want to sell you a complete solution. It's a very normal thing, right? To add in the peripherals into the core anchor app sale, whatever, in every technology, right? Except for subscriptions, because it's very difficult to sell subscriptions. And that's basically it. Unless you use AppBind, of course, then it's magical.
Don, what are your thoughts?
Billy is encouraging me to jump in here in the chat, so I will. I agree with all the points made. The other thing I'll say is just like, there's a lot. This is a hard question to answer, and it's so different for everyone. But like, I would say in general, like, I would use this to fill out your customer, that your whole customer value and your customer. I would use it as a product solution, not as a commercial solution. These integration app stores. It's like if you have a customer service tool, for example, and you want to do SMS, like you want to provide your customers the ability to do SMS, you're not doing it yourself. Use the integration marketplace to sort of round out the features that your customers are asking for. Make the experience of your app directory as clean and as nice as the experience is of your product, and consider it a part of your product less than, and in my mind, more than a part of your like sort of commercial initiative. So, that's sort of been, I think, what's done well at Slack, that we've never commercialized our integrations. And to us, it's just been a way to get as many people in there developing and creating, ultimately making us become the de facto platform for collaboration. And that's sort of what happens if you open up the floodgates and you brand this as a value solution rather than like a commercial solution for you and your partners.
Just a thought, it gets really exciting, I think, when you have the scale of a company like Slack, which like all the departments in the company use, or even like platforms like Figma or Webflow. You mentioned Wix, Sonia, and I think companies should innovate there and try to recreate. Like we are really focused on our integration and doing like this powerful app store of integration, which is a really good thing to do. But if your product can be extensible in other ways, and if you can leverage customer communities that build plugins, then that's somewhere you can monetize down the road, help create an economy on top of your product. And so sometimes I think it's good also to take a step back from just the typical integration marketplace and look at how innovative companies, even like Airtable or Notion, are able to unbundle this and give it in the hand of customers, not just other SaaS companies. I think that can be an inspiration from like growing the marketplace further than the limits you have in the beginning. And then
some of the aftermarket is on point, because Bill Gates' famous quote about platforms: you don't have a platform unless the other business is building on top of you or making more money than you are. And like giving it all away for free is something you can do when you have a lot of equity, cash, like investment money you can burn, right? It's the giveaway, it's the eyeballs thing that Silicon Valley is interested in. You just want to have volume of action, but it's not an economy. It's not sustainable. Whereas Microsoft, they're a juggernaut. They're 1.3% of the world's global economy in 2019, probably more now. Like 1 of 80 people on this planet are basically fed by Microsoft, which is absurd to even think about. And they're number 1 or 2 in every market in SaaS that they've entered. They're impossible to beat, just without them even trying half the time, because people build businesses on them. It's hard to convince people you're feeding their kids and getting them to college or whatever to get off your platform, right? Yeah, and it's a valuable strategy.
I mean, a more modern take on that is like Shopify. They've created a massive ecosystem around their platform. There's tons of companies, small businesses mostly, that have built their entire business around being a Shopify app. Like that is 100% what their value prop is. And I don't know, I think the Microsoft analogy is, or example rather, is interesting when you think about sort of the new trend in like more like modular and composable tech stacks versus like monolith. And this is all like sort of philosophical, but I think the Shopify ecosystem is sort of what the Microsoft like VAR ecosystem used to be in terms of like the reselling and affiliate. But this is, again, these are all my personal feelings.
I'll give you
I think it's great for a Shopify merchant. Totally agree. I think it's a radically different mindset, despite the highfalutin statements that they'll make at conferences and then earnings calls around how much value they create for the partner network. I think they're very interested in the value extraction, and they have crossed that continuum and where they can do it because they are the dominant provider from an e-commerce platform. But there are many partners who've not had lovely experiences there. I can assure you.
But this is the innovator's dilemma, right? I mean, this is if you don't do that, you don't have this tension between the underlying platform extracting value and also creating value so people can grow, then you don't have enough revenue capital to expand. Like I have this saying, the revolution must be profitable. If you don't have capital, you're not going to be able to expand the market share of what you're doing. But like another example is WordPress. They have a ginormous WordPress ecosystem, but they absolutely encourage everyone to sell those plugins and make money, right?
Yeah.
So unlike other open source projects that were like, yeah, I don't know, money, who cares? Yeah.
I believe in capitalism. It's when it gets in that mob kind of vein that I get a little frustrated.
Well, you haven't had Richard Stallman put his fingers in your tahini, and I have, and so I am very much opposed.
Sorry.
It's a true story.
Salesh, I think you unmuted, and then I think we have to wrap after our final comments here.
Is that the quote that's going to live with me?
What?
Richard Stallman put his fingers in my tahini. Okay.
Oh my goodness. Okay, I think we are at time. I really appreciate all of you guys spending some time with us. This has been a really fun conversation. I think Sunir and I can probably debate this stuff like forever, so we won't do that on a panel for everyone to watch. But for the folks that aren't already a member, you can find more great content and also get access to our Slack channel if you go to SaaSecosystemalliance.com and apply there. We've got these folks and others having lively discussions in our Slack. Stay tuned for more of these great panels. And I really hope to see all of you guys out there in the field. Really appreciate, again, the panelists taking the time.
Thanks, Christine.